Saddle them up. We're good. So guys, after that session, it shifts. I don't know if you guys felt the shift in the group, in the spiritual body that we had here, but after you talk about that, there's always a shift. And the conversations change. Instead of, where are you from, yada, 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 the conversations are really in depth and people are talking about, wow, when they said such and such, and I had this, and you're talking about the experience. You're having an experience while you're having this experience. Hopefully you were having conversations like that. Somebody who will remain nameless came up to me, Jolene, during the break, and she said, oh my God, this woman came up to me and she saved my life, and it was exactly what you were talking about. She told me the truth. You got to learn to tell people the truth. This is not a popularity contest, guys. People's lives are literally on the line. Now, you don't go in there with a big book and shove it up their backside, or beat them on the head with it like it's a bat. But we have to start telling people the truth, right? One of my favorite expressions is the only problem with the truth is you get instant results, And when you tell somebody the truth, they may not like it, but it cuts through the wall. It finds its way through the chink, and I guarantee you 20 years later, they're going to remember that you told them the truth. You may be the only person that told them the truth, and when they finally hit bottom, guess whose phone is going to ring? It's going to be your phone. And Jay and I were laughing about it because we were talking about how a lot of the old timers hate our guts. They cannot stand us because they're afraid of us because they haven't done this work this way, and yet they've got 15 or 20 years or whatever under their belt, and now all of a sudden they want to kind of steer clear of you because they know that we can see them for who and what they are because we've done this work, and you can tell people who are spiritually awake. You can tell who's alive, And it's funny because they don't want anything to do with us, but when somebody comes in with a problem, guess who sends them to us? The old timers will go, oh, you need to go talk to JR about that one, or you need to go talk to Dave, and they'll kick them over to you, and you can literally save somebody's life. Why? Because even though they don't like you, they know you speak the truth. And they know that you have a solution. Even if they don't have it, they're at least man enough to point them towards the solution to give them the help that they need. Does that make sense? You are literally on a life and death errand when you're doing this work. Really powerful stuff. So, you write this inventory, right? Now it's time to go do a fifth step, right? And the big book gives us a couple choices, It says you can go to a closed-mouthed friend, you can go to a priest, you can go a spouse, but I would never do that, Because how do you do that without creating a harm, right? So you go to them and you find this person who you're going to read all this inventory to, and then you go to it, right? You're in for a long discussion, and you go through and you look at the nooks and crannies, and what are you really looking for? When I'm hearing a fifth step, I'm looking for forgiveness. First and foremost, with resentment, I got to hear the forgiveness. And if I hear "but" in a sentence, we got a problem, Well, I did such and such, but she did. I'm like, whoa, time out, right, stop right there. We need to go back and look at your forgiveness. You didn't write a proper forgiveness prayer. How do I know? Because they're using the word "but." They're couching their answers. They're hesitating. They're not taking full responsibility for their side of the street. The other person could be 99.9999% wrong. You still have to take responsibility for your 0.00001 that you own. That's what the fifth step is about, is seeing where you were wrong. Where were you at fault? This is particularly hard when you get people that have been molested or raped, right? When that happens, they come to you, and the typical response I hear is, what the hell did I do to deserve that? I didn't do anything. And here's the answer that I give them. When did that happen? Well, it happened when I was 13. And I say, it's absolutely abhorrent that you had to go through that, whatever it was. But you were 13. You've been carrying that. You're 56 years old, for God's sakes. You've been beating yourself up for all these years, holding on to that because you're not willing to forgive. How long are you going to do this? F.O.T.S, which had a big, huge influence on Bill Wilson, wrote, he writes in Around the World with F.O.T.S, he says it takes two things to create a jail, a prisoner and a jailer. But guess what? They're both in prison. Just depends which side of the bars you're on. If you want to hold somebody in an emotional prison because they hurt you 30 years ago, you're still in prison. I guarantee you the other person doesn't think about it in the slightest. You're the one who thinks about it every minute of every day, and you want your pound of vengeance against that person. You want to be judge, jury, and executioner. Anybody recognize those voices? That's the itty bitty shitty committee. That's theater lie stuff. Do you want vengeance or do you want to be free? What Alcoholics Anonymous is selling is freedom. And that freedom comes from a relationship with God, right? But it comes at a price. What you want doesn't matter. You don't get a vote because you work for God today. You leave the vengeance up to God and you can still get free. It's a wonderful gift. So we go through this process. You hear the fifth step, and I've heard it all. I mean, nobody shocks me anymore. I mean, I've heard everything from aberrant sexual behavior to violence to, I even heard a fifth step once of a guy who was a male nurse, and he was injecting stuff into people's IVs. He killed a whole bunch of people, you know. Well, he was a heroin addict. He'd get high, and then he'd go to work, and then he was just, you know, stoned, and when you shut the brain off, it does bizarre things, you know. He ended up becoming a priest, you know. So there can be salvation. I'm a drug dealer. How many lives did I destroy by dealing drugs? I can never square that account in my lifetime, you know, but I'm free today. I sit before you free. Doesn't mean I don't have an obligation to all the harm I've put out into this world. I will spend the rest of my life to my dying breath trying to work for God to make amends for the harms that I've caused. Could somebody let that lady in? It looks like she's locked out. Thank you. Thank you. Does that make sense, guys? Do you want vengeance or do you want to be free? And very often I say that in the fifth step. What is it that you want? And you get to make that decision. And I've had guys look at me and say, I want vengeance. And I'm like, okay, I think we're done here. There's not much more I can do for you. You know? My job is not to help them there. My job is to lay the spiritual toolkit at their feet, to tell them what it's capable of doing. It's your job to pick up the toolkit, right? So after I hear their fifth step, the book says we get a quiet hour, right? And it gives us these instructions. Remember the stuff I had you go write on page 75? Well, this is why I had you write it. 75.3, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart. That's a prayer, right? It's a gratitude list. You can call it whatever you want, but you're going to thank God in this process. How do you know God better? Because you know what's been blocking you off from him. And you know you've removed it. You've removed the vengeance and you've gotten the forgiveness. That opens a direct channel to God, to love. You've seen my emotions. They're right under the surface. I'm not crying. I'm weeping. You cry when you're in pain. Those are tears of joy. Am I terribly sad about what's going on with Cody and his daughter? Absolutely. But those were tears of joy because he's surpassed that. He's overcoming and he's seeing the miracle for what it is. Miracle after miracle after miracle. And I get a front row seat. I'm a lucky son of a guy. All right? So we thank God from the bottom of our heart. We know him better. Taking this book down off the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. That's page 59. I have the guy write it in there, page 59, so he doesn't have to look for it. All the instructions will be right there. Careful reading the first 5 proposals, the first 5 steps, we ask if we've omitted anything. Well, did we omit anything? Or is there a resentment we missed? You know, just ask those questions. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? We've been really thorough. We've written 5 separate inventories. I think your work, if you've done the work as the book says, your work is pretty solid, right? Are your stones properly in place? So you got to go back to the cornerstone and the keystone and take a look at what those passages mean. Get a look at the foundation and the footing and all that information. Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Were all you looking at is problems and problems and problems and problems? Was that all you wrote about? Or did you discover solution? Through this work, you should have found some solution. You should have some forgiveness in your heart. There should be some new love in your life. There should be some care and concern. Even though there's harm, there should be some guilt that you've hurt these people and a willingness to want to go clean that stuff up, right? That's the problem solution of the cement that we're talking about. Have we tried to mix mortar without sand? Right? So you get an hour to do that. Oh, you guys didn't yell at me. I didn't flip the switch. After you've done the hour, right, we get a couple questions. Step 6, and I hear people all the time, I'm working on my 6th step. Step 6 is 2 questions and a prayer. If you get the questions right, you don't even have to say the prayer. You go right on to the 7th step, and the 7th step is a prayer. I don't know what the hell they're working on, right? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness, there it is, willingness again, as being indispensable. Here comes question number 1. Are you now ready to let God remove from you all the things you have admitted are objectionable? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, you move on to question number 2. Can you now take them all, every one? If you answer yes, you go on to step 7. If either one of those was no, then you're given another instruction. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God. Remember the prayer? It's a square around that one. We ask God to help us be willing. God, please help me be willing to get rid of these character defects. And now you move on to step 7. Done, right? Now, one of the things that I've added, and this is not out of the big book. The big book, basically, that's the instruction. Step 6 is over, and you move on to step 7. Who's going to remove the character defects? God, not you. Some of the character defects, I realize, because the book gives us 3 tools, prayer, meditation, and vision, and they're always together. We're saying these prayers, we're asking God to remove it from us, and we do that in meditation, but I couldn't get my hands around what's the vision, because I have this character defect, I don't know, pick one, dishonesty. And it's funny, when you listen in AA meetings, listen very carefully in AA meetings, you'll hear the topic will always be honesty. What's the topic? Honesty. There is not a single person in this room that has a problem with honesty. Our ego's twisted. We all have a problem with dishonesty. We're liars. That's not honesty we have a problem. We have a problem with dishonesty. Somebody tells us the truth. We're like, oh man, thank you for telling me the truth. It's the lies that we have a problem with. So if I'm asking God to remove my lying behavior, is it going to be removed? Not without vision, at least for me. I need to see something. If I only have one tape to play, I'm going to play that tape. I like to think of it as an arrow in a quiver. The little case that holds the arrows. If I only have one arrow in that quiver, guess what arrow? I'm going to shoot that exact same arrow every single time. If the only way I know to defend myself is to lie, I'm going to lie. Every single shot will be a lie. But if I can see myself doing it something different and saying, you know what, let me give this a shot. Instead of saying a lie, let me say, I don't really know. I've just created a second arrow. Now, caught off guard, guess which arrow I'm going to shoot? The one I'm used to shooting. Boom, I'm going to lie. But if I'm working on it and I'm taking it into prayer and meditation, let me try this new arrow, see how that works. I don't really know. And wow, I get an outcome, and it's a good outcome. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I start to say that every time I get caught in one of those situations, instead of lying, I say, you know what, I don't know. Before you know it, I've been doing that long enough, the new arrow becomes the old arrow, and the old arrow gets removed from the quiver. And now the character defect is gone. You know when it says we outgrow our character defect, we outgrow our fears? What does that mean? Right? Everyone in this room, when they were 2 years old, threw temper tantrums. Why? Because they're highly effective. The first time you throw a temper tantrum on a new parent, they, oh, Mo, honey, what's wrong with you? You get lots of attention. After about your 50th temper tantrum, they just let you lie there and cry. Why don't you do temper tantrums? Because you outgrew them. Why? Because they're no longer effective. If you create new arrows in your quiver, the old arrows become ineffective and you'll stop shooting them because they don't work. The new ones work so much better. So to help me with that, I created a list for me. This is just me. It's in your package. Once again, I'm anal retentive. Bad is in red, green is in good. I have every one of these character defects, every one of them that's listed on the left-hand side, hands down. So I don't check every single box. On this specific inventory that I just wrote, what are the character defects that I had? And I'll go through and I'll check those off. And then in my quiet hour, I will look and say, okay, here's the 5 main defects. I'm codependent. I'm afraid of being out of control. What would be a different way? Instead of feeling that, let me go back to Al-Anon. Ooh, Al-Anon, add more Al-Anon to my life. There's a vision for me. there's a new arrow in my quiver. I'm going to start going to an Al-Anon meeting on a regular basis. Or let me go read a new Al-Anon book. Or let me write an Al-Anon inventory. There's so many different ways you can create the vision, but you got to take a positive tact towards it. Does that make sense? You got to create the new arrow for your quiver. And so I just use this as a technique. Use it, don't use it, totally up to you. But for me, it's tremendously effective. If I can see a negative behavior, I can change it. Typically, when I'm sitting in my office, it's my computer screen, and that's my cave. When I go into my cave, I go into to think, I go into to focus, I write inventory, I do spiritual exercises. My wife knows if I'm in my office, kind of leave me alone. When something's troubling her, she'll come to the office door, right? And I call it the turret, because I have this giant cannon, and she's interrupting me, and I swing the cannon over to blast her. Like, what? So what comes up in my mind is, that's probably not kind and loving. I shouldn't be doing that behavior. So the vision I have in my mind is, as I swing the turret, to say, instead of going, what, which was the old arrow, my new arrow is, as I'm breathing in to say what, I say, yeah, honey, what can I do for you? This is God's truth. That's my arrow. And that's what I try to fire, And she'll go, oh, honey, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and she sells me something pink, right? What does my blue mind hear? I can solve that problem in a nanosecond. Here's your answer. Get out of here. Why are you bothering me? That's not what comes out of my mouth, thank God, but that's what I'm thinking, right? And here's a little Dave's theory on alcoholic thoughts. Your first thought is always crap. Get rid of it. Your second thought is usually about 80% of the time crap. You might as well get rid of that. Usually your third thought is you're finally starting to get into the realm. You've had a chance to think about it. Pause is huge. So my sponsor gave me the instruction, before I opened up my mouth, I had to count to 3. So it would be like, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Yeah, baby. Because it gave me time to not engage my mouth, because those arrows were so fast. Because remember what I said, sarcasm in my family of origin was sport. That's what we did. I got a very quick and very sharp, barbed tongue. That's what I was trained with. So I've had to work really hard to break that habit. So when you're doing this, when you have something that's embarrassing to you, or that it doesn't work well for you, when the dust settles, do a postmortem on it, figure out what it is you don't like about it, and then get a vision. Figure out, what new arrow can I put in my quiver? And then you practice. And trust me, if you put a new arrow in that quiver, God is going to give you an opportunity to practice it very quickly. It's going to come up again and again and again until it becomes the old arrow. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift. Does that make sense? Cool. 7-step prayer, right? When ready, say something like this. You heard my talk about the 3rd-step prayer? I'd make my guys do the exact same thing with the 7th-step prayer, right? My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. What are you giving to him? Let's be specific. Write your own 7th-step prayer, right? Get it out there. It can be an unbelievably powerful deal. Are we asking God to remove our character defects in the 7th-step prayer? What? We're willing, that's why we're asking the prayer, because we have willingness. But when we go to say the prayer, are we asking God to remove our character defects? No. Categorically not. It's a trick question. What are we asking God to remove? Only the character defects that block us off from Him. Right? We want the character defects that keep unplugging our vacuum cleaner from our source of power. My experience, and I know thousands of alcoholics have had this experience, sometimes God will use your character defect to advance His kingdom. And I always tell the exact same story. I was in my military uniform. I was late. I was driving to McGuire Air Force Base. I swing into the 7-Eleven, and this old biddy's counting out change. She's in the line ahead of me, and I'm like, I gotta go. What doesn't she understand? Come on, lady, hurry up. And she's having chat, and she's talking to the guy behind the counter. It was actually a girl. She's talking to her, and they're making nice, and I'm sitting there, I'm getting madder by the second. Would you get out of my way, please? And when I get up there, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have a whole bunch of change to give you, and I'm really nasty and sarcastic, this poor girl. I make my transition, I get in my car, and I'm bolting down the New Jersey Turnpike, and I'm like, oh, you dumbass. I got to go make amends. I get awakened in my spirit. So I hang a jug handle, I hang a Yui, I go back, and I walk through the door, and now there's no line. And the girl behind the counter sees me. And you could see the look on her face, and she's like, oh shit, it's him, right? And I had to go up to her, right? And now the spot check inventory says, we at once asked God to remove it, so I asked God to remove it, and I drive back, and then the second instruction is we tell somebody about it. I told her, the person who I had just attacked, I told her and said, excuse me, ma'am, but when I was in here, my behavior was completely and totally, utterly unacceptable. Then my third instruction is to make amends. And I am so sorry. I regret my behavior. There is no excuse for why I treated you that way. It was abhorrent. And is there anything I can possibly do to make your day better? And she's like, just get out of here, basically. She's like, no, thank you. It's okay. I said, no, really, ma'am. I read her name tag, the same technique I just taught you guys earlier today. I read her name tag, and I said, Susie, what can I do? No, really, I want to help. Is there anything, please? I want to help. I can't believe I treated you like that. I am such a horse's ass that I would treat another human being like that. And I said, how are you doing today? She said, I'm doing okay. I've had some rough customers, but I'm doing okay. And I'm like, once again, I really regret that I was the one that really gave you a hard time. And she's like, nobody ever does this. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm in a 12-step fellowship, and part of when we create a harm, we have to go clean it up. And so I'm cleaning it up. I'm trying to do it quickly. And she says, what do you mean 12-step fellowship? You mean like AA or something? And I go, yeah, AA. And she looks at me. She says, my brother's got a drinking problem. Talk to my brother. I said, of course. That's God's grace using my character defect to advance his kingdom. I called up her brother. I made the offer. I laid the spiritual toolkit at his feet. He didn't want anything to do with it, but I planted the seed, right? And I moved on, right? For years. I mean, I was down McGuire for over 20 years, and I would stop at the same 7-Eleven, and for a lot of years, that same girl worked at that same 7-Eleven, and she'd see me, and she'd go, hey, Dave, how you doing? She knew me, and she'd thank me for talking to her brother, even though it wasn't particularly a successful 12-step call. I don't know if I ever made it sober, but that's not the point. The point is God used my character defect. We're not asking God to remove our character defects, only the ones that are blocking us off from him. Critically important thing to understand. Okay? Way cool. All right, we already talked about, I can't read that from here. My computer shut down. Here we go. Or write your own 7-step prayer. There you go. Step 8, we already talked about it, right? We have a list of all persons we have harmed and whom we were willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. It comes from your 4-step. So I have people all the time say, I'm working on my 8-step list. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? You're transferring the names over onto a sheet of paper? Well, no. I'm like, well, did you not do a 5th step? Do you not know who you've harmed? Well, no. What they're doing is they're marking time because they can look over the horizon and see the 9th step and know they don't want to go down there. That's going to hurt. They're going to lose some skin in the game on that one. So they're going to sit on their 8th step and die. I'm just the guy, I got a size 13 foot. I'm just the nice guy to kick them off step 8 and move them on. Tell them the truth. Right? Step 9. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage in the past. It's about repairing, reparations, making it right, right? We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated in our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. So if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. There's a prayer. Once again, if we don't have the what? The willingness. Remember I said it's in every one of the steps? Willing doesn't mean like. It means are you willing to do it? I always tell this story. My brother Don, the one who was in the program and died, when we were kids growing up, I mean, we were like stinking shit. We were always together, always getting in the same trouble. We were just buds. And, I said, you suck, as a brother. You suck as a brother. And I took off running. And, of course, he's chasing after me. And I hop over the fence into the horse paddock, and I got to make it across the horse paddock. But he catches me in the middle of the horse paddock, and he tackles me, right? And there's a big pile of horse manure right there, and he's going, who's the best brother in the world? And I'm like, F you. And he grabs my arm and he's cranking it up behind my back, and every time he cranks up my arm behind my back, my face goes down closer to the horse pile, and I'm like, no, you're not it, you suck. And he cranks it up even higher. Eventually, when I was about to eat a road apple, I became willing to say, you're the best brother in the world. I was not happy about it, but I was willing. Like I said, I love word pictures. Right? What's our real purpose? 77:0. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in and of itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce we have gone religious. I'm not there to share my spirituality, although I don't shy away from talking about spirituality. I'm there to repair the damage that I did. The analogy I like to use is that Doris, nope, she got it, is a lock on somebody's heart. I hurt you, right? I've created a harm to you. What I've done is I've put a lock on your heart and I hold the key. Nobody can unlock that harm except me, right? Talk to anybody that's been molested or raped and they will tell you that the other person controls their life, right? They can still get free if they have forgiveness, if they find forgiveness. But when somebody comes to make amends for a harm like that they've caused to you, they've got a key to your heart, and you hold the key. So that's my vision when I'm going to go make an amends, is I've got a key to some harm that I've caused to you, and only I can unlock that door. So when I'm going there, I put on my spiritual armor before I go. So I am working for God, and I walk in there, and I say, you know what, I believe that I've caused you the following harms, A, B, C, D, and I go through that process. And my goal is to heal them, to unlock their heart and give them an opportunity to heal right in front of my eyes. And it's really a cool experience. So I say, these are the harms I've caused you, and then I ask 3 questions. Well, I was a blackout drinker, so a lot of times I don't even know what I've caused. So I go to somebody and I say, I think I've caused you the following harms. We used to date, and I think I've hurt you in the following ways, A, B, C, and D. And they look at you and they go, you think that's what you caused me harm? Let me tell you, Buster, this is what you caused me harm. And they start listing things that you have no recollection of because you're a blackout drinker. And you're sitting there and you get slack-jawed and you're going, I did what? Huh? Ooh. How do you handle that? You tell them the truth. I have absolutely no recollection of it, but it must have been so hard that you had to go through that. I regret the fact that you had to experience that, and you let them share it with you. And then the second question I always ask is, do you need to tell me how any of this harm, how this really truly harmed you? How did you really feel about this? You've had all these pages and pages and pages of inventory. You've been praying about it. You've been meditating about it. You've talked to your sponsor or your spiritual advisor about it. You've spent a lot of time healing yourself over this process. Now you're showing up on their doorstep and they're still in pain from 20 years ago. Give them a chance to heal right in front of your eyes. Say, tell me about it. How did that really hurt you? And they start to cry and weep, and they're saying, you crushed my spirit, and this is what happened, and I had to go to counseling and therapy, and they start telling you all that, but they're getting the venom out. They're healing right in front of your eyes. Then don't make the critical mistake and get arrogant and say, well, if I pay you $150 and I do this, this, and this, that'll make it right? You don't tell them how to make it right. You ask them to tell you. They're the one that was harmed. You say, is there any way I can possibly make this right? Please do not deny me the opportunity of being of service and cleaning this up. What can I do to help you? And you let them tell you. And then I have a line, and I'll show you on the cards that I use. I have a line, and underneath the line I write the word A for the answer. Whatever they tell me, I write it down. When I was going out and making my amends before I'd met my wife, I was a serial dater, and I was abusing these women, and I'd go to make amends to them, and a couple of them were really, really sick because they said, wow, I really love you and I want you to date me again. And I'd be like, okay, and I'd write down, wants to date me. And I'd say, I got to take this back to my sponsor and I'll get back to you on that.
Yes.
I wouldn't say yes, no. I would just be like, I have to take this back to God. I have to pray about it and I have to talk to my sponsor. And then I go back to my sponsor and say, hey, she wants to date me again. He'd go, absolutely not. You've hurt that girl enough already. Call her back and kindly thank her for her offer, but let her know that you've hurt her once and you're not going to hurt her again. You're done hurting her. Wish her well, go with God, peace be with you. I'd be like, okay. Great sponsor, right? There was one girl that I was like just praying that he said, yes, I can date her again. And I was like, he's like, absolutely. I mean, he read that at 1,000 yards. He's like, don't even think about it, buddy. You ain't going there.
Sir?
All right. Yes, sir. Sure.
On step 7 and 8, we're discussing right now, step 7 is persons we have harmed, and then on step 8 is the word people. What about, we've heard institutions, employers, education, law enforcement, or spiritual, like churches and stuff?
Churches are made up of people. Law enforcement is made up of people. I guarantee you didn't hurt law enforcement in general. You hurt some specific person in law enforcement, right? Employers.
I mean, if you didn't give 100% to your employer on the job or a school, you just got seized.
So you go back to your boss, the owner of the business, and you say, hey, listen, when I was a lousy employee, you know, you take ownership for what you own, you know. Gosh, I haven't told this story in a long time. I was very arrogant. It was in that really sobriety period where I was really, really sick, and I wasn't going to meetings, and that's not an excuse. It's just giving you some background as to where I was spiritually. I was really, really, I was so dry, I was a fire hazard. And this bank pissed me off. They were right down the street, and I don't know what crime they committed, but they did something, and so I very arrogantly marched into the bank, and I'm like, I've had it with you people. I want to close my accounts. Give me all my money. And the guy's like, yes, sir. Ooh. You know, he types on the computer and counts out the cash. And as he's counting out the cash, I know what my balance is. And he counts an extra $1,000 as he's counting out the cash. And I don't say a word. And I grab the cash, boom, and I'm out the door. Right? I just stole $1,000. And that sits in my craw. It was probably a couple months later when I finally hit my bottom and I started going back through the steps, and I'm writing new inventory and I'm going back to make an amends. And this is one of the amends I got to go make. And I go back to that bank and I walk in. And I'm like, I need to see so-and-so, and they're not in the bank anymore. And I'm like, they're not in the bank. And they're like, yeah, let me get the manager for you. The manager comes over and says, is there a problem? And I said, well, yeah. When so-and-so was working here, there was a mistake made, and they gave me, I need to see so-and-so. I didn't want to go into the whole detail. And he goes, well, he got fired. I went, excuse me? And they said, yeah, he got fired. And I realized that he got fired because he gave me $1,000 and he couldn't account for it at the end of the day, and they terminated him. And I'm like, well, how do I get in touch with him? And they're like, well, I don't really know. I only know that I know that name because he's used to be an employee here, but that was before we bought the bank, and it was in consolidation period. The bank was owned by somebody else, and I'm like, so I'm talking to the manager and say, well, I got this $1,000 that didn't belong to me, that it belonged to the bank. He goes, but that was before we ever bought the bank. He goes, I don't know. I can't accept your cash. There's no way to account for it. And I'm like, well, what do I do with it? And he goes, I don't know. That's not my problem. It's your $1,000. You know, so I'm walking out of the bank, and I've got this $1,000, and I've gotten this guy fired, and I'm like, how do I do this? You know, I just didn't know. And so I went back to my spiritual advisors, and they said, well, you've got $1,000 that belongs in, it's God's money, it belongs back out in the universe. So go donate it to someplace, you know. So I go back into the bank like the next day, and I go to the manager, and I said, hey, he doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about. I said, my sponsor says I got to donate it. I said, what charity does this bank support? They said, oh, we support the local food bank in the county. And I'm like, great. Can I donate it in your name to the county? And he's like, absolutely. So I donated $1,000 to the county, right? So I fixed that problem. And then I got to try to track this guy down, you know? And it took a long time. And it was a God thing, but I ended up finally tracking the guy down. And he's like, yeah, you know, I didn't want to be a banker anyway. My heart really wasn't in it. And I mean, he let me off the hook completely. He's like, man, I'm glad you're doing okay, you know? But what my point for telling that story is I harmed the institution, but I also harmed an individual. So I had to make that up. Does that answer your question? So there's always a way to do it. Yes, in the back.
I'm Adrian, and
Hi, Adrian.
I have a question before we go on. And I'm trying to find out from you, because you said it a little bit, but I want you to reiterate, why is it that when you teach the program like you're teaching us today and this weekend, why is it that when you get to the rooms, there's a problem? And I'm not sure if it's just a problem with you teaching the way you teach with the old timers, because I heard you say a lot of the old timers don't like the way you teach. Mm-hmm. But what you're teaching is the truth. I need you to talk a little bit more about that so that I can try to wrap my brain around why is there a problem when you're speaking the truth?
Right. For the tape, why is some of the old timers have a problem with what I'm teaching? Is it the way I'm teaching it, or is it or the message that I'm sharing? The problem is what I'm teaching, and as you've seen, I quote everything out of the book. If it's not out of the book, I will point it out and say, this isn't from the book, this is my own personal experience. So what I'm sharing is either what Bill and Dr. Bob wrote, or it's my own personal experience. They really don't have a leg to stand on to argue with either one, because it's my experience or it's the book. The problem is in the early to late 70s, it's probably around 73, they changed the law in the United States where insurance companies had to pick up treatment and started having to pay for it. So rehab started to spring up, and a whole crop of who are now old timers came in that time period. And they went through a 90-day or 30-day spin dry cycle, and they show up at AA, and they didn't get sponsors. They kind of hung out. They were spouting things that they learned, like it's a selfish program and all that other crap that we hear in meetings today. It's still being taught by some of the rehabs. Some rehabs don't even use the big book. You know, they take their people out to AA meetings, but they don't use the big book, and they don't sponsor, they don't have them write inventory. They take them through the first 4 steps. They don't even fifth step. If they do, they fifth step with a counselor who doesn't hold them accountable, and they don't make the amends. For whatever reason, there's a whole crop of old timers that are hanging out in AA that are hiding in the fellowship. And the way you can identify them is because they're using AA like a spiritual filling station. They have to go to meetings on a regular basis. If they don't go to a meeting because they go on vacation and they miss like their home group for a week, they come walking in and they're all shaky and they're like, oh my God, I needed a meeting. I was on vacation and, why? Because they didn't take God with them. They haven't had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So when they hear somebody that's talking this way and they haven't had that experience, it scares the hell out of them. And they've lost the gift of desperation that they had when they first got sober. They were willing to do whatever it took. But now they've got status. It's even worse if they've relapsed and they haven't told anybody. Now that nobody knows that they didn't get caught drinking, and now they've got the secret they got to hide. Man, they scared to death from somebody like me. You know, there was one guy, he's in my Steel on Steel group, Mike. He came for years, and I knew he was drinking. I could smell the vodka on him, and I got a bad sniffer, and he knows I talk about this because he talks about it. It's hilarious, and his son passed away from an overdose, and he was totally codependent on that. He did not hit bottom until he was in a psych ward, and he didn't have any shoelaces or a string in his sweatpants, and that was his bottom. And he's like, "Whoa, something's wrong with this picture," right? And then he came in, and then he came in. He's like, "Well, Dave, I've been drinking for a while now," and I'm like, "Yeah, Mike, I know." He's like, "You knew I was drinking that whole time?" I'm like, "Absolutely, I knew." We can see it. But we plant the seed and we wait for it to germinate. And he wasn't ready yet. When he was finally ready, he was ready. The old timers I'm talking about are like that. They know they're living a lie. They're hanging out in AA. It's all about their status as an old timer. People kind of bow to them and genuflect, and it's their meeting. Ooh, that's a scary topic. Oh, that's Bob's meeting. Who the hell's Bob, and why is an AA meeting somebody's meeting? Do you guys not understand the traditions and the concepts? Something's really out of whack here. That stuff goes on. And they're like the grand poobah, and everybody kind of bows and oh, Bob, can we hold a group conscience, Bob? Oh, yes, you may. Kiss my ring. It's ridiculous at some meetings. That's what I'm talking about. And so somebody that's alive spiritually, they can see that at 100 yards, comes walking into a meeting and kind of goes, whoa, I don't want what that guy's got. And then he starts talking to other newcomers. That's a total threat to his kingdom and his little fiefdom that he's got going. And you become really unpopular really quickly at Bob's meeting. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I was listening to Joe Hawk on the Mad Dog Recovery
Yes.
page, and he mentioned, I forget, that a newcomer in the early days at AA could not go to a meeting unless he was on the 8th step. Is that, so were they doing the process like we're doing it, or was it a quicker version of this stuff? I couldn't find any.
I love Joe Hawk. He was a phenomenal guy. I knew him well. He got some of his facts a little bit out of whack. What he was talking about is in early days in our history, there weren't 12 steps. Bill Wilson, guys, never worked the 12 steps. There weren't 12 steps. He hadn't wrote them. There were 6 steps. He worked the 6 steps of the Oxford group. Dr. Bob worked 6 steps. When the Saturday Evening Post article was written, when some of those articles came out, there was a deluge of people that came walking through the door. There was only probably 30 people in recovery on the planet, and all of a sudden they got 300 people walking through the door. So they started having classes, and they went through the very rudimentary, this is how you do the steps, and it became a little movement. And they had little pamphlets, and they're still available from the Cleveland Intergroup, and you can read about that in our history, and because they had to process these guys very quickly. And then Bill Wilson wrote the 12 steps, and he wrote the big book. They got some literature, and all those guys then came through and went through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous through the book. These days, there's no excuse for that. Now, I have taken guys, if I get somebody that's a real hardcore wino dude, that guy's chirping like a squirrel. He does not have 2 or 3 days to go through the work. He comes through the door and he says, man, I'm ready for sobriety. We go through the steps, and I'll sit down in about 6 hours. He's walking out of my door, out of the doghouse, to go make his first amend. You hear that? 6 hours, he's walking out to go make his first amend. We go through boom, 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 boom. It's not thorough. I don't need it to be thorough. I need to get rid of some of the guilt, shame, and remorse this guy's carrying because he's going to drink otherwise. He makes an amend or 2, 3 or 4 amends, and then he comes back, and I'm like, okay, now he's calmed down. The whole time I've got him praying and meditating and going through the process. Now we start on page 1 and we go through slow because I don't have to worry about this guy relapsing off the bat. That's not the issue we have today. That's a rare thing these days. That was how I originally started my work. These days, we get guys, they're coming from a 30-day spin dry cycle. They got a nudge from the judge. They show up in AA. They've been to meetings. It's not their first time. They may have been around and here's the key. Listen for this. Well, I've been around AA since 1982. What does that mean? Is I can't stay sober, right? And when you get somebody like that, he can quote you the book. My record right now is 37 rehabs. I worked with a guy who'd been to 30. All that meant to me was he could teach rehabology, and he had fantastic insurance and rich parents. He did not need another 30-day spin dry. He did not need more education about THIQ and all the low self-esteem, all that stuff. What he needed was a good square foot up his backside and to say, hey, are you done drinking? Let's go through the 12 steps. Why don't you try Alcoholics Anonymous? And he tried Alcoholics Anonymous, and last I heard, he was still sober today. And didn't need another rehab. Program works great. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. How am I doing on time, JR?
45 minutes.
45 minutes, cool. We're doing good. All right, now you can't see what I got up on the screen because my thing's locked up. Real purpose, all right. We talked about talk of God. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, let me say that again, when it will serve any good purpose, we're willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. Extremely difficult for an alcoholic to use tact and common sense. I often, when I'm making amends, I'm praying throughout the amend. I'm asking God, give me the words, help me with this. When they start going towards that, they want to figure out, they know that something's different about you. They're like, are you some kind of religious nut? What's going on? I got to use tact and common sense. And I say, no, I'm not a religious nut, but I found a power greater than myself, and I'm working a 12-step program, and that's why I'm here to make amends to you. And I keep pointing it back as to why am I there? They don't want to know what my theology is. They don't want to know what I believe my God is. Now, I'm from the Bible Belt now. I'm in Texas. And in Texas, they love to talk about God. So if you might get some, well, what church you go to, honey? Y'all come over to the Baptist church, or you go down to that other church down the road? And they want to talk about it. They want to get off the course. And I have to keep nudging them back. Well, that's not while I'm here. We can talk about that after I'm done. I'm here to talk about the harm I created to you. And I'm here to clean that up. Does that make sense? Tact, common sense, very difficult for this alcoholic. The man we hated. The question is how to approach the man we hated. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done to him. And though we have acquired a better attitude towards him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. Interesting. We're going to get something out of this. It's going to be good for us, right? We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. Notice it's underlined there. I underlined it. I cannot go to somebody I hate unless it's in the past. We confess our former ill feeling. I've underlined that. It's got to be a former ill feeling. If you're still hating the person, you haven't done your forgiveness prayer, you have no business going on that amend. Because it's not an amend. You still have something against your brother. Go clean that up. When it's a former ill feeling, then you can go make the amend. And when you do, you express your former ill feeling with regret. You can't do it if it's still active. Does that make sense? Cool. We don't say we were sorry. Alcoholics are always saying that, and we've lost the value for us. I tell all my guys, you have lost the right to say the words, I'm sorry. The big book doesn't give the words, I'm sorry. The big book gives, we express our regret. What's the difference? Oh, I smashed your car, sorry. Is there any penalty on that for me? No. That cost me nothing. When I say I regret, particularly, and this is very true for women, regret has an emotion behind it. I'm sharing with you something, I feel bad about this because I'm expressing regret, and they respond to that. Now, if they're still angry at you, they want to know, well, how much regret do you really feel? They want to twist that knife a little bit. But if you're spiritually centered, you can handle that. You say, I really feel regret about this. I've done a lot of work on this. I've agonized over this process. And you explain to them what you've done. All the inventory you wrote and how the people, you had to go share it with another human being, and the prayers and the meditations and the things you wrote to get to the point of being here. And they're like, oh, he really does regret that, right? Then they realize it's the truth. Make sense? Cool. Vump. His faults. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. We simply tell him that we will not get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. I cannot emphasize that. This is particularly true when you go to somebody in the program. So you say, hey, Joe, I need to get together with you. I got to make an amend to you. And you show up to make the amend, and Joe realizes that he's hurt you too. And so I say, hey, Joe, man, I'm here to, I know I caused you the following harm, and you start into it, and he's like, well, I've hurt you too. He wants to make his amend, but he didn't make the appointment. Right? Because he hasn't bothered to do the work. Probably hasn't even told his sponsor and fifth stepped it, but you have. So I look at him and say, excuse me, I understand that you want to do that, but I came here to make my amends to you. I would love to hear your amends, but can I get through mine first? We go through that process and I make my amends. And it's a learning experience for him. It's maybe the first amend he's ever seen. So I finish making my amends, and then he starts to make his amends to me, and I say, have you talked to your sponsor about this? Honest question. I'm not saying it mean. Well, no. Well, did you write about this? Well, no. I say, well, my experience is that it might be beneficial to you to have that experience. I don't want to deny you. I'd love to hear your amend. In fact, I've already forgiven you. I have no problem with this. But if I hear this now, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to deny you the opportunity of having this cool experience with God going through this process. And I suggest you go back and talk to your sponsor and have that experience, because it's one of the coolest things on this planet. And I love you enough to tell you the truth. Don't miss that experience. His choice. If he wants to keep on going, I'm all ears. Don't be surprised if he has a hard time when he gets to the point, what can I do to make it right? My response is the exact same. You know how you can make it right with me? Go back to your sponsor, write the inventory, because I want you to be able to teach it to all the guys that you're supposedly sponsoring. Yes, ma'am.
I forgot to ask earlier, the guy that you said you knew was drinking, did you say anything to him?
Yeah, he was in my Steel on Steel group, and so we were making suggestions. We were making, is it possible questions, Is it possible you need to talk to your sponsor? Is it possible you need to go back? Is it possible you're going to relapse? And we'd say it with inflection. Is it possible you're going to relapse? And he was so in his own private Idaho that he wasn't picking up on the fact that, yeah, we know you've already relapsed. Everybody in the room is all looking at each other going, yeah, we all know.
So no one said it like that, we all know you relapsed?
No, because there's a fine line between, Steel on Steel is a spiritual deal, and you can crush somebody's spirit and they won't ever come back. So we're very careful with our words. In our opening, we talk about how we're sharing with love and tolerance, and everybody in the room know what we're talking about, including him, but he wasn't ready to hear it. And he'll tell you that to your face. You know, he knew that, he didn't realize that we actually knew that he had already started a relapse. He just thought he was going under the radar, was getting something by on us, but after the fact, he knew. He's like, yeah, I knew you guys knew that, but I couldn't believe you didn't call me out on it and embarrass me. And I'm like, that's not what we're here for. We love you, brother. We want to help you. You know, and he's one of the greatest AAs, man. He's in the trenches. He's carrying the message. He's on fire. Just a really cool guy. Mike is just a top-notch character. But he had to get on the anvil and get the shit beat out of him to become that sword. You know? Question, sir.
When we're making amends, I've heard it is very important that when we call them up and ask for permission, would they be open to hearing a man?
Yes.
And get their permission first.
You-
Just showing up.
You don't just show up, you make an appointment, right? Men's take 2 calls, the appointment call and the actual amend, number 1. Number 2, if it's an old girlfriend or something, you have no idea what her situation is. So you want to go make an amends, but she may be dating a jealous boyfriend. And just you reaching out to her, she might get the crap knocked out of her. Well, who's it? Your old boyfriend's calling you and you talk to him, boom. You know, you have no idea what you're going to do. So in those scenarios, I would go to a female in my home group and say, hey, Sue, would you help me with some amends? You got some time to help me with an amend? They look at you kind of crazy and they go, yeah, what do you need? Well, I got this old girlfriend, I want to reach out to her, but I don't know what her situation is and I don't want to get her hurt. Because I don't know if she's got a jealous husband or boyfriend or if she's single, whatever it is. Would you be willing to send her a message, private message on Facebook and ask her if she'd be willing to get in contact, accept a contact from me? Oh, sure, no problem. And then the girl reaches out to the other woman and comes back with a, yes, she's willing to get a message from you and here's how she can contact you. Or, no, she doesn't want anything to do with you, go forth, go with God, you know, we're done. Now she becomes a person that can't be seen. Now I got to write the honest letter. I don't send her the letter because that can hurt her, right? But I write her the honest letter and I go through that process. In that case, I would do a surrogate amend, which is not in the book, it's just my own personal experience. I would write her a letter, and if that didn't get free me of the guilt and shame that I was still feeling from that scenario, then I would find somebody that reminded me of her in the program, and I would go up to her again and say, hey, Sue, you remind me of this woman. Would you be willing to listen to an amend letter that I wrote to her that I can't mail to her because it's going to cause a harm? Would you be willing to listen to that? And then I read the amend letter to her and say, if somebody had read that to you, how would you have responded? And she steps in the surrogate role to read back to me how that would have happened. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Can you clarify, we often hear people talk about their part.
Do you know what your part is? All of it. It's none of their part, right? Their faults are not discussed. Whatever that is, we don't even look at it, right? As a matter of fact, when I write inventory and I get to column 3, when I'm going to go write my my forgiveness prayer, I take my page and I flip it over so I can't see column 1 and 2 and 3. I literally take a blank piece of paper and I go over it. Because what's in column 1, 2, and 3, I don't care anymore what's in there. Now I am saying a prayer to God so that I can get free, that I can get forgiveness in my heart. What they ever did is none of my damn business at that moment. Then I look at column 4. I don't need to know what was in 1, 2, and 3. I need to know where my selfishness, my dishonesty, my self-seeking, my fear was. Then I can take the paper off. When I go to make amends, I've transferred the harm I've caused from that short form to an 8-step list. Columns 1, 2, and 3 aren't there. I'm not going to discuss any of that stuff. It's not even on my piece of paper. All it says is, Susie Q, I created the following harm, A, B, C, and D. So how am I going to discuss their part? There is no part, right? And if they want to talk about what their actions were, I say, whatever you did, that's on you. I have no interest in that. You know, I say it nicer than that. I say, you know, I know you want to share that piece, but I'm really here about what I did to you. What you did is between you and God, you know, and if you feel guilty about that, I'll be happy to hear it, but that's not what I'm here for. Because as far as I'm concerned, whatever you did, I forgive you already. I let them know that they're forgiven for anything that they want to bring up. They're feeling guilty, I give them the gift of forgiveness right on the spot. Boom. Comes out of your mouth very quickly. And they just kind of go, and they change the subject. Make sense? Cool. Let me keep going. What is that? Owing money is the next one. Oh, I love this one. Cool. Most alcoholics owe money. We don't dodge our creditors. Tell them what we were trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. We are nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of our creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. What may be the penalty if we are afraid to face our creditors? That's Dave's question. What's the penalty if you're afraid to face your creditors? Drinking. Going to make amends for financial harm is like kissing a baby's butt to drinking out of that bottle. You know, and in my younger days, when I had much less tolerance than I have now, I'll never forget it. I had this kid in my kitchen table, and he was giving me a bunch of pushback on having to go make amends. And so I have an alcohol-free household, but I keep one bottle of booze, and it's in a grab-and-go kit in the garage. So I got to the garage, and I grab my grab-and-go kit, and I bring it into the kitchen, and I open it up, and I got plastic bags and rubber gloves and sanitized wipes and roll paper towels, all the things you're going to need on a wet 12-step call, right? And there's a little baby bottle of vodka in there, because sometimes you got to feed them some booze to get them to the detox so they don't have a seizure in your car. You know, so I grabbed that bottle of vodka and I popped the top, spin that thing off, and slide it across the table and stick it right in front of him. I said, "Take a good whiff of that sucker." And he's looking at me like, "What?" And he's like, but. I said, "What's easier, drinking that shit or going to make the amend? What's your choice?" And he was like, "Can we put the lid back on, please?" "Sure, not a problem." You know, I'm not that aggressive anymore. I tend to lay the spiritual toolkit at their feet these days. But it makes for a really kind of an interesting time in my life. Strength and direction is the next one. Well, these reparations take innumerable forms. There are some general principles which we find guiding. We remind ourselves we have decided to go to how many? Any lengths to find a spiritual experience. This is about you having a spiritual experience. Yes, you're there to clean up the harm you caused, but it's for you to have an experience with God. You're stepping out on faith. You're stepping into the river, right? We ask that we be given the strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position, our reputation, face jail, but we are willing. Remember willingness? There it is in step 9. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be a hasty, foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. Before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we obtain permission, we've consulted others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. They're talking about an infidelity. We are sorry for what we have done and are willing it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further. The one rule of amends, well, there's a couple rules for amends. The first thing is, number 1, you got to know the harm that you've created. I have people all the time call me up and say, "Hey, I think I need to make an amend." And I'm like, "Really? What's the harm you caused?" "Well, I'm not really sure." And I go, period, stop, time out. If you can't tell me the harm, you don't need to make an amend, because you're after something else. Your ego is involved. If you can't say, "I've caused A, B, C, D, this is the harm," and you're not clear on it, we're not going any further. So I send them back to write inventory, go talk to God, do some prayer and meditation. Let's figure out if you in fact did do a harm. What usually happens is there's some kind of quirk in the relationship, and they might have done something they're a little embarrassed about, and they're not sure if the other person took an offense. They're being codependent. They may want to say something, but they're not really sure. Take it to God. If God doesn't tell you you owe an amend, you don't owe an amend, you know. But this I'm not really sure, let me call my sponsor. You called the wrong guy. I'm not going to answer that question for you. I'm going to send you back to your source of power. Number 2, the rule for amends is you cannot create a harm in so doing. Period. You can't save your skin at another person's sacrifice. Done. You're not going any further than that, you know. One of the worst things we can do is trigger jealousy. That's why I talked about how I would approach another female. I don't have that problem today because I don't talk to women. You know, I get emails. No, I'm serious. I get emails all the time from women. you know, and trust me, I've got scars I can show you. It has been a terrible problem in my relationship with my wife. She has suffered because of this. Because women will reach out to me and they'll say, oh, would you take me through the steps? And then there was a time in my life when I would. Because there really weren't any women that I knew that were doing this work. But now I'm married, and my commitment is to my wife, and she's jealous, you know? And that's nothing against her, that's on me. So when I get an email from a woman, I immediately forward it on to my wife. And then my response, I blind copy my wife. And I direct them to other strong women. I send more women to poor Carlene. You know, I'm like, contact Carlene Harmon. She can help you with this. You know, there's several women that I know that are big book thumping women that are doing the deal, and I hand them off to a woman. They have no reason to be talking to me. I had an experience. I didn't realize I was going to talk about this one, but I had experience recently where I got an email from somebody that lives near me. You know, and, you know, Tyler was emailing me back and forth, and I'm like, you know, like, hey, I really liked what you shared. You saved my life, yada, yada, yada. Can we get together for a cup of coffee? And I'm like, well, hey, you live in Grapevine. There's a Old West Cafe. Why don't we meet for breakfast? So I get to the cafe early, and I'm waiting, and I said, well, I don't know where they are. So I ordered breakfast, and Tyler comes walking up to the table, and I'm like, and it's this woman. And I'm like, can I help you? And she says, hi, I'm Tyler. My jaw hit the floor. I mean, I was like, you know, I don't eat by myself with another woman. That's inappropriate. I won't get in a car with another woman by herself. I'm not going to do it. It's not right. From a perception, somebody sees me driving around the road when it's somebody, it's not my wife, that's a harm that I'm causing to my bride. Well, is he cheating on her? Ooh, I don't know. You know, talk about gossiping, and hey, you know, I'm not going there. So, I mean, my favorite place on the planet to eat breakfast is Old West Cafe. They make the best lemon blueberry pancake. I couldn't even finish my breakfast. I'd already ordered. I ate like half of it, and I was like, nice meeting you. I got to go. I'm out the door, gone. And the very first thing I did was I marched into my wife and said, honey, I regret that this occurred. It was not my intention. Here's what happened at A, B, C, and D. I didn't realize that Tyler was a woman, but Tyler realized she was a woman, and I guarantee she played off her name in order to meet me for that breakfast. You know, I don't know what her intentions were, but it put me in an unfavorable position with my bride. You know, so I don't go there. You know, that's just my own rule. I don't go there. There's plenty of resources, and I create these resources, and I put them on the web. I give them away for free so anybody on the planet can get them. I'm making sure the hand of AA is there for you. You know, but the hand doesn't have to be my hand. There's plenty of women that can be there to be at their hand. Does that make sense? Cool. I think I beat that dead dog enough.
Would that be you're being a sponsor to a woman, and you're denying another woman that could sponsor her?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. I'm not going to sponsor a woman. There's plenty of women that need to sponsor, and there's plenty of women that have really solid spiritual programs, and they feel a little self-conscious because they don't really get a chance to do it enough, you know, and plus we manipulate the opposite sex. You know, if you're straight, you manipulate the opposite sex better than anybody on the planet, pretty much. You know, when I first got sober, I wanted a female sponsor. And I went up to this woman, I was like 3 weeks in the rooms, and I said, hey, would you be my sponsor? And she's like, honey, no, that's not how this thing works. She was hilarious. Her name was Terry, and this is very crude, but this is exactly what she said to me. She said, honey, she says, you're old enough to be my son. She said, it's really cute what you're asking me to do. She goes, but I know what your intentions are. You really need to talk to other men. She says, as far as when it comes to women, you will find some other woman to suck your dick. That's not going to be a problem. I suggest you stay away from women for a while because that'll get you drunk. See that guy over there? See that guy over there? See that guy? Those would be good sponsors for you. And that's exactly how she said it. And I was like, okay. She did not mince words. She told me what she really thought, and she knew what my intentions were, you know. Boom, off I went, you know. And then it's funny because I got Carl as my sponsor. I go through the work, and it was probably 2 or 3 years later. There was a woman, yeah, it's on tape. There was a woman who that Terry was sponsoring. And I went to Terry because I wanted to date her sponsee, and I said very sheepishly, Terry, can I date your sponsee? And she said, yeah, you've changed enough, but I'm going to warn her about you because I know what your intentions really were when you first came in. And I said, yes, ma'am. Yeah. It didn't last long. I went to college and met my girlfriend, who's now my bride. We've been married for well over 30 years, and I'm a happy, lucky man. Anyway, blessed, very blessed. All right, well, I'm still back on strength and direction. Let's try this. Jealousy. Our design is not a one-way living, and I'm going to try to speed things up because how many minutes do I got? 24 minutes. It's all in here. The 9-step, there's all these different categories for how to make 9-step amends. I could spend 3 hours talking to you about the 9-step, going into the nitty-gritty. You can read it for yourself, and it's in the notes. I give detailed explanations and examples for how to make your 9-step amends. I condense them all into, boom, 9-step instructions condensed, right? There's 12, look at that, 12 condensed things. Imagine that. Don't emphasize the spiritual, or do not emphasize spiritual feature on the first approach. I don't want to call them up and say, I found God. Can you come see? Can I go make an amend with you? I say, I think I've caused you a harm. Would you be willing to meet with me? Then on the second approach, then I go ahead and make the amend. And the second approach, when I'm actually doing the amend, if they ask about why I'm there, we can talk about my spirituality. Our whole purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. I'm there to make a demonstration of goodwill. If I owe you $100,000 and I don't have $100,000, that amend isn't going to be complete for quite some time, but I'm going to make a demonstration of goodwill. I'm going to say, you know what? I can afford to pay you $25 right now, and here's my situation. Here's my balance sheet. I can't give you more than that, but I'm willing to give you this and start the process, and I'm going to, with God's help, we're going to get this thing done. That's my demonstration of goodwill. I can't do anything more than that. I make the best deal I can. Don't shy away from the subject of God. Be willing to announce your convictions with tact and common sense. If you're an enemy, we talked about that. We never criticize or argue. We tell them, never try to tell them what they should do. We're only taking responsibility for what we should do. And you got to keep bringing the subject back to, I'm here to make amends for what I caused you. Some people are very difficult because they, especially if they're another alcoholic and they're active, they only want to talk about themselves. Oh, yeah. But when you did this, it really hurt me this way. And blah, 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 blah. And you never get around to being able to share with the harm that you know you've caused them. So sometimes you have to keep bringing it back. This is the harm I know I caused you. This is the harm I know I caused you. This is the harm I know I caused you. And eventually you'll get it all done. His faults are not discussed. Your manner should be calm, frank, and open. We don't dodge our creditors. We arrange the best deal we can. I use a card system. Right? On the front of the card, I put the name, the address, the phone number, how to get a hold of them, if there's a website, Facebook, whatever, any information I know, right? I put down some instructions for me, what I'm going to do. Tell them what I'm going to do, tell them what I'm not going to do. These are the instructions right out of the book. I print these cards up on my computer and I just fill in the blanks, right? It's 3x5 cards, so it fits in my pocket, shirt pocket. Because I've had alcoholic amnesia, where you go up and you knock on the door and they open up the door and your mind goes blank. Because your anxiety kicks in and you're like, and you forget why you're there. If I need to, I can reach in there and go, I'm here to make amends because I know I've caused you the following harms. And you read it right off the card. It's been years since I've had to do that. But there were a couple of them where I was literally shaken and I had to read it right off the card. Thank God I had the card. On the back of the card are my 3 questions. I've got the information. I know I've caused you the following harm. Oops, you guys, I didn't slide it forward, did I? Is that the back of the card? Yes. All right. I have a reminder myself. I've decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience. And then boom, I know I've caused you the following harm. I beat you up, I stole your money, I slept with your wife, whatever it happens to be, there it is. And then I have the 3 questions. Are there any more harms I've caused you or may not know about? And then I wrote in there, shut up and listen. Let them tell you. It's their turn to heal. Do you need to tell me how any of this hurt you? Shut up and listen. Boom. Is there anything I can do to correct this wrong? And then I wrote down, write it down. And I have the little A there. Whatever they tell me, I write it down. It's none of my business what they tell me. I write it down. I bring it back to God. I pray about it. I share it with my sponsor. We get a group thing and we figure out how we're going to handle this thing going forward. I do not try to decide myself, because I'm always going to be way too lenient on myself when it comes to that. Does that make sense? Cool. Psychologists into action. There's a whole bunch of slides here. I want to get to the prayers. Boom. If there was one thing that I would teach, if I could only impart one thing to you people as a group, it would be the 12 daily prayers and the 12 daily meditations that the Big Book gives us. A lot of people have never even heard about it, but they're in there, right? And the 12 daily prayers, the 12 daily meditations is advanced AA. It's what separates the men from the boys. It's where your spiritual growth comes from. When I did the meditation this morning, I went through the prayers. I don't know if you followed it. If you're a practitioner of it, you know what I'm talking about. And people go crazy. They're like, well, where are you getting this 12 daily prayers from? I don't know. Those aren't in my big book. And I go, yeah, they are. Look at number 1, right? It says, so we clean house with the family, asking. Remember, there's a square around that word. It's a prayer, right? If you're asking something from God, you're praying, right? Asking, how often? Each morning. I don't know how you interpret that. I interpret that I'm supposed to do this every single day. This is what we call a living amend, right? Asking each morning in meditation. When am I supposed to do this prayer? In the morning. And then, remember I said there's 3 tools and they're always together. Prayer, meditation, and vision. The prayer is the asking, the meditation, and they're telling us right here, to meditate. And what am I meditating on? That my Creator show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Well, if you're the tornado roaring through people's lives, who do you hit? For me, the first person I hit is my wife, Brenda. And I think about it and I go, okay, God, please show me the way of having patience with her. What comes to mind will be the turret. You know, as I'm swinging over it, I'm going, what? That's not patient, it's not tolerant, it's not kind, and it's not loving. That's what comes to my mind. So my meditation is, well, were that exact same scenario to happen right here, right now, what would be a better way to handle that? And what I came up with was, yeah, baby, what can I do for you? That was my vision. And I made that vision, and I don't have to redo that vision. If it worked yesterday, it'll work today. It'll work tomorrow. It'll work until one day when I turn around and go, really? You came into my office? Really? Oh, shoot. I guess, yeah, baby, isn't going to work anymore. I need to modify that vision. So I have to do a postmortem on it and figure out, why didn't I catch it with my new arrow? What about the scenario was different? How did she approach me differently? And I need to modify and tweak my vision. Does that make sense? And then I will have a new arrow in my quiver, and that will be my daily meditation until it doesn't work again. But it goes very quickly, because this morning when you heard me do my prayer meditation, God, please show me how to do this for my wife, and then I go through my kids. You know, I go to anybody that I know I'm going to see. I knew I was going to see JR. I knew I was going to see Carlene today. I do it for the people I know I'm going to be in touch with. I go to work. When I go to work, I have no idea who the crew members are I'm going to fly with. I don't know who the other pilots are, the flight attendants. It doesn't stop me. I'm like, whoever I'm flying with, help me to have patience with them, tolerance, kindness, and love. And what I'll think of is some aggravating captain that I just flew with who had this terrible behavior that was driving my ADD nuts. It was, why did he have to do that all the damn time? One guy, for example, he gets in the seat and he has to touch every single switch in the cockpit. Physically touch it. And he's going through and he's touching. I'm like, come on, let's run the checklist. We're late. He's just touching away. It was his OCD. Patience, tolerance. What's my patience? Well, run the checklist whenever you get done. No harm off my back, you know. I don't care there's 250 people in the back that are waiting on us, but okay, I guess today we're going to take an extra 10 minutes to touch every switch, you know. But I digress. So I do the patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, even if I don't know who the people are that I'm going to be working with. If I know I'm going to some scenario, I'm going to a charity event, I would do it for whoever I run into at the charity event. And I'll get a vision. Well, there's going to be somebody that's going to take my name when I walk through the door. Well, I'm coming into this event. I knew there was going to be somebody at the desk. If you didn't know who was going to be at the desk, you could do this for them. Well, let me be kind. Let me read their name tag, introduce myself. Hey, how you doing? Thank you so much for being of service to us. They're the unsung heroes of these kind of deals. They work their butts off for us. Nobody ever thanks them. You know, we should be thanking JR and Carlene and everybody else that worked on this thing, the host committee. They worked their butts off. This prayer will work for that. Cool. 2, This is the second one. It comes from step 10. This thought brings us to step 10. What thought? The thought of the 9-step prayers. It comes right after the end of the 9-step prayer promises, right? And it says, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Understanding and effectiveness of what? The world of the Spirit, right? This is a spiritual journey we're on, right? This is not an over matter. It should continue for how long? Our lifetime. Can you do that once and not do it again? I don't think so. So I do this every day, right? Here comes prayer number 2. It comes from 84:2. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Not if these crop up, when these crop up. We ask God. There's the prayer. At once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately. There's instruction number 2. We make amends quickly. There's number 3. If we've harmed anyone, then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Number 4. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Number 5. They're already telling us how your vision is supposed to look. You're supposed to clean up the mess you made, go help somebody else, and use love and tolerance when you go to do that. What does that look like? Should be obvious. Pop into your head. Prayer, meditation, vision, boom. There's your spot check inventory. Right out of your 10th step. Right? Prayer number 3. What we really have is a daily reprieve. How often? Daily. People look at me and I go, I don't know how you interpret this stuff, but it says I'm supposed to do it every day. Daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And here it comes. Every day is a day when we must, there are no musts in AA, by the way, we must carry the vision, there's the vision, of God's will into all our activities. They give you the prayer. How can I best serve thee? Thy will be, not mine be done. There's your prayer. What does it look like to bring God with you to this conference? What does it look like to go to the work on Monday morning? Are you going to bring God with you to work? What is that going to look like? Get a vision of it. Oh, there's that guy in the cubicle who's sitting next to me. He drives me friggin' nuts. Oh, wait a minute. He likes donuts. You know what? I'm going to stop at Dunkin' Donuts on the way to work, and I'm going to bring that SOB a donut. Because I'm going to be patient, tolerant, kind, and loving. I think that's what God would have me do, to give a love offering to that SOB.
Even if he needs to touch every switch?
Even if he needs to touch every damn switch. Yeah, thank you for that, JR. Appreciate you. Proper attitude, right? 86. We shouldn't be shy in this matter of prayer. Better men than us are using it constantly. It works so we have the proper attitude and what? Work at it. What's the proper attitude? Remember I taught you from page 55? Right? There's the proper attitude on 55:4. It's right here, right? I got it on the screen, I think. Yeah, it's up there. Think honestly, search diligently, sweep away prejudice, and you can join us on the broad highway. There's the proper attitude, right? Have you ever connected those two statements together? And look at the promise. It comes after it. With this attitude, you cannot fail. That promise is given to us on page 55, and we carry it into our daily program when we're working this 10-step on a daily basis. Really important deal. Prayer number 4, we constructively review our day. It says when we retire at night. That was a change that wasn't in the original volume. The original multilith said when you awake in the morning, look back over the day before. Bill Wilson, if you read our history books, Bill Wilson, Lois, Dr. Bob, Ann Smith, none of them did it at night. They all did it in the morning. Why it got in here, I don't know. For years, I did it at night, and when I'm at night, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you. I go through the day, and I just want to go to bed. And I cut myself all kinds of slack at night when I do this. The next morning, no, I've had a good night's sleep. I am tough on myself. So I do it in the morning. I look back over the day before, I go through the 12 questions. Now, I know there's only 11 here. Right in the middle of it, it says, were we kind and loving towards all? I am almost always kind to everybody because I don't want to look bad. It's my ego, right? I don't want to look bad. But I'll smile and I'm shaking your hand. I'm going, in my head, I'm hearing, you, what a dumbass. Yeah, nice to meet you. How you doing? You know, that stuff goes on in my head. Or I'm driving down the road and nobody can hear me. And I'm like, who's the jackass driving that car? They gave you a license? I'll even say it out loud. Yeah, my wife's yelling, it's you. Yeah, you're the jackass, right? So I split those into separate questions to hold myself accountable, because I can be kind and not loving. In the old days, I'd answer, if I was kind, I'd say, well, that's a yes, when I wasn't loving. So it's much harder, and plus I like the number 12. It's all throughout the book, so I have 12 questions now. So I do the 12 questions. At the very end of it, in green there, it says, but we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. People that have bad self-talk to each other, to themselves, this can be a problem. You got to work really hard, and the way you can work through that is write your questions out and send them to somebody. I have a guy from Georgia every morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning, boop, up comes his 12 questions. And I look over them and I send them back any changes or any things I want to comment. And if there's negative self-talk in there, I flag it instantly, because he can do that sometimes. After making our review, here comes the prayer. We ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. There's your vision, your meditation and your vision. You got to pause and think about it. Well, what did I do wrong? What has God put on my heart that was wrong, and how should I clean it up? And you create a vision. That becomes my plan for the day. How am I going to clean up the mess from yesterday before I create a new mess today? Does that make sense? Cool. Boop. 5. Prayer number 5. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or reflection, for that would diminish usefulness to others. What correction? All right, I just covered that one. We consider our plans for the day. Here comes number 6. Yes, sir.
You're ahead one.
Am I head 1? I'm on 6?
Well, 5.
Now you're back on 5.
9 minutes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And you're 5.
Now I'm on 5. How's that? Now we down 6? There we go. Before we begin, right, we ask God to direct our thinking. There's the prayer. Ask God. Especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with insurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. I don't know about you, but I can ruin my entire day before I've had my morning pee. So I've tried to train myself that when my eyes wake up and I'm awakened, I start my prayer life before I even roll out of bed. Thank you, God, for another day, for a chance to live in a decent way, and I go right into this thought prayer. Because I know that I can ruin my whole day. If my brain engages and the hamster gets on the wheel and the chatter of the 1,000 monkeys start, I can be off in the weeds before I've even finished my business. So I say that prayer on the way to the toilet. I am urgent, I got to go. But God, please direct my thinking, don't let me screw this day up, Keep my thought life divorced from self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking motives. Do my business. I wash my hands, and now I can start my day, because I've asked God's protection for my thought life. Because where does the problem reside? Top of page 23, in our minds. It can get you into the weeds really quickly. That's prayer number 6. Prayer number 7. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. What are you going to do today? Oh, I don't really know. I got a couple things to do. Well, alcoholic wants to jump at an answer. No, we don't do that. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God, prayer, for inspiration, an intuitive thought or decision. Well, where do we do it? We have to meditate. We relax. We take it easy, right? We don't struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers come if we've tried this for a while, all right? Prayer number 8. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown throughout the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of any problems we're going to face. So what kind of possible potential problems you got today? Oh, I got to go to the DMV. That's always a problem. I don't care who you are. That's a problem. You got to go to the DMV. God, give me the strength to go to the DMV and not yell at the ticket counter or, whatever is going to happen there. Help me not, I know I'm swearing too much, but this is how my mind works. When I'm saying to myself, help me not lose my shit at the DMV counter. That's just that's what's going on up in the committee. That's prayer number 8. Prayer number 9 is the one prayer that gets missed by more people, and it is one of the most powerful prayers that we have. We ask especially for freedom from self-will. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate, seemingly without provocation. It's self-will is the root of our troubles. You got to call on your source of power to help you with that, or you're going to get into the weeds. This is what starts sobriety, is letting self-will go unchecked. You got to call on your higher power to help you with it. We may, however, ask for ourselves if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. So no, I'm sorry, you don't go to the Cal 10 and go buy your lottery ticket tonight because that's selfish. Yeah, I know you'd help some other people with the money, but no, that doesn't count. That's really not a true prayer for everybody else. Sorry to piss on your parade. Prayer number 10. If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. If you are married or in a committed relationship and you haven't invited your spouse to do this with you, you're missing a wonderful blessing. Praying together at meals is a wonderful thing. It's even better if you hold hands and pray at a meal. It's powerful, the physical touch, the energy that transpires. It's a really cool deal. And don't get in the habit of you always saying the prayer. Today, I think it was at lunchtime, I looked at my wife and said, honey, it's your turn. And I got to hear my wife. My wife's a wonderfully amazing spiritual woman. Sidebar, completely sidebar, she started going through the Bible and writing these, taking passages out of the Bible and writing these little anecdotes for our kids. And when she had like 150 of them, it was like, honey, that's the beginning of a book. So she wrote 366 of them, and for Christmas, I published the damn thing, and it just blows my mind of the wisdom that is in my spouse, and I had no clue. Amazing stuff. Be quick to see where religious people are right. She's much more spiritual than I am, and she's very quiet about it. She's very humble about it. And that book was designed for our kids. It's a legacy. That's the mark she's leaving on history for our children. What a cool blessing. I never would have known it existed if she wasn't willing to voluntarily share that this was what she was up to. If we belong to religious denominations that requires a definite morning devotion, you got to do that. We sometimes select and memorize a few prayers, your 3rd-step prayer, your 7th-step prayer, the 11th-step prayer of St. Francis, the rosary. I don't care what it is. Go read some Emmett Fox or some of the early Desert Fathers, the Philokalia. Add that stuff in, mix it up, right? Our next thing is supposed to grow in understanding and effectiveness. You got to grow in your spirituality to offset the disease, right? Prayer number 11. As we go through the day, how often? 3 minutes. How often do we do this? Every day, right? You're going through the day. We pause. Now, I know this doesn't affect anybody in this room except me, but when agitated or doubtful, we ask, there's the prayer, for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, and they give us the prayer, thy will be done. I struggled with this for years. I couldn't figure out how to do it several times in the day. I'd do it a couple times in the morning, I'd forget, and all of a sudden I realized I haven't done it in the last 12 hours. What the hell's wrong with you, you dumbass? The one thing I don't miss is I graze, baby. Look at my belly. I never miss a meal. So what I started doing was spot checking at every meal. So I get up in the morning, I say my morning prayers, and then I go have breakfast. And I say, okay, how am I doing from 15 minutes ago when I woke up and did my prayers to right now? Well, everything's great. All cylinders are firing, the vacuum's plugged in, we got power, right? And then I go to work and I have a snack around 10 o'clock. I'll pause and go, thy will not mine be done. How am I doing, Lord? And I go, I've been a little bit agitated. I've been a little bit indifferent. Some things will come up. I can do a spot check right then. I'll do it again at lunch. I'll do it at 3 o'clock when I eat something at 3 o'clock. I have a little sugar, a little caffeine to pump up the volume at 3 o'clock at the circadian low. Eat dinner, 5:15, 5:30, 6 o'clock. I'll do it at dinner time. I go to my AA meeting. We say a prayer at our AA meeting, right? Usually a moment of silence. Time for me to do a spot check. Boom. I'm going to bed. I do a spot check. How did I do? Between every single interval. And the next thing you know, several times each day, I'm saying this prayer, thy will not mine be done. It will help stabilize you and get rid of the spikes of anger and agitation that you have going through your life. That's prayer number 11, right? It gives us one more thing there in green. We are in much less danger of excitement. We are adrenaline junkies. We love excitement because when you get excited, there's a dopamine dump. It's a drug. It's an extremely powerful drug, and your brain makes it. No bueno for us, our types of people. Excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We don't tire easily. Why? Because the hamster isn't on the wheel all the time. We're operating from the eyes of our heart. We're centered spiritually. So you don't have all this RAM going on where the chatter of 1,000 monkeys, you're not wasting all that energy. And it actually builds your life up. You can get more done for God. And lastly, but not least, prayer number 12. 164:2. This book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him, there's the prayer. When? In your morning meditation. What you can do each day for the man who's still sick. How do you know what it is? You got to get a vision. You meet a new guy, comes into your home group on Tuesday. I walk up to him. I don't give him my phone number. I get his phone number. I call him on the spot. I take a photograph of my face and I write my name and I text it to him. He now has my number. It's my job to reach out to the new guy. I'm the guy with the answer. So I call him up and I say, hey, dude, it's Dave, the big goofy guy you met last night. How you doing? Right? He's the guy who's still sick. He's on my list for tomorrow. Or, who haven't I seen in an AA meeting in 3 months? Oh, Pete. I wonder whatever happened to Pete. Let me call Pete. There's so many different options you have for this particular thing, but it takes intentionality. You have to work at it. It can be the old crusty old timer that's in your group conscience that always votes exactly opposite of you. Start calling them on a regular basis. Hey, Joe, how you doing? What's going on? You want to get together for a cup of coffee? I'd love to get to know you better. He's a man who's still sick. He's probably sobriety. Go have a cup of coffee with the guy. You never know what kind of a friend you might make. The answers will come if it's a conditional statement, if your own house in order. But obviously you can't transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Here's your homework assignment, big book thumpers. The big book mentions a great fact somewhere else, and it's not on page 164. If you want extra credit, come back tomorrow and tell me where the other great fact is. All right? Kind of an important thing to understand. The great fact for us is really, really important. Though it's a really quick run through of the 12 prayers and 12 daily meditations. They're in the notes for your study guide. Right? Critically important. Here's how I work it, and this will take 30 seconds. Hang on a second, guys. This is really important. If you try to sit down and do all 12 prayers, you will fail. Let me say that again. If you try to start out doing all 12 prayers, you are going to fail. It's going to take you 45 minutes and you're going to burn out. Start with prayer number 1 and only do prayer number 1. Patience, tolerance, kindness, and love for your family members. Do that for a week. I guarantee you, after you've got that vision and it's going for a week, you got that prayer down. Week number 2, add in prayer number 2. By the end of 12 weeks, you're doing all 12 prayers, and it'll take you on average about 8 minutes. It doesn't take a long time. Take it in bite-sized chunks. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, and I suggest you start with the trunk. Thank you, guys. Wonderful session. Is it really important?
I was going to say, where the other great fact is.
Oh, yeah, well, that's for tomorrow. If you guys have any questions tomorrow, I'll have some time for answering questions. Now we're going to supper, right? Supper time, guys. Woo!